Our topic for today would be, Be'ezrat Hashem, alternative medicine in Torah perspective. Now, as we can all understand, speaking about alternative medicine like it was some one-size-fits-all, it's completely just incorrect. And as a matter of fact, in the recent years, someone in, I think it's in Bet Shemesh or Modi'in or something, so he released a whole book about different types of alternative medicine according to Halacha. And what we will do here is we only have some introductory remarks how to approach this issue. But obviously, many times, each one of these specific methods would have to be, I mean, if there is a specific practical halachic question, it had to be dealt legufo shel inyan per the method that is being debated. So that's a general ha'ara before we begin. Now, beginning to speak about alternative medicine, again, before even we go into the sources, we immediately meet with the question of definition. What is alternative? Meaning, I guess that for those that believe in a certain set or a certain way of treatments, then everything else is alternative to what they do. So alternative is a question of geography, as many other questions. So I would define alternative for the sake of our shiur, of our subject. We define alternative as treatment methods that were not yet, and maybe would never be, verified in the accepted proof process of the established institution of Western medicine. I hope that was clear enough. So again, if it was not proved, now that can be, so that would put in the same basket, and I am not a doctor and not beginning to be a doctor, maybe to the dismay of my mother. But anyhow, I cannot define what was, excuse me, what was given, what is verified, what is not verified. But to the best of my understanding, the definition we just gave would put in the same, under the same title of alternative medicine, meaning alternative to what is accepted as proved by the medical institution. So that would put in under this title, for example, having a chicken soup. Right? If you have the flu, as best as I know, there was never, maybe there was, but to the best of my knowledge, there was no scientific experiment with double-blindedness and with taking into mind the placebo effect, etc., that proved this method as effective or as ineffective. So that would be alternative medicine. And the same can go for many, many others of what we call, I don't know what would be the English term, trufot savta. Right, so that all of these things, and again, to the best of my understanding, the same is correct for taking vitamin C. If I understand, maybe I'm wrong here. And again, I am not a doctor. You should ask your local doctor, not your local rabbi, about medicines. But to the best of my understanding, vitamin C was never proved in a serious way as help. I mean, obviously, we need it as we need any other vitamin in our body, but it was not proved that taking it in any constant manner really increase the chances of catching the flu or anything else. And but under the same title would also maybe homeopathic medicines, which again, and here there were tests and studies that were done, but to the best of my understanding, they were never able to scientifically and statistically prove that homeopathy medicines do work. That doesn't, of course, negate the fact that many people say that it saved their life. So fine. So again, but it was not proved in a scientific and statistically proven way. And many other methods. So I hope that we made ourselves clear. So it doesn't matter if it comes from the East or comes from the West. It doesn't matter if it involves body and spirit. It's holistic way of treatment, or if it's only, again, chicken soup. For our purposes right now, I put under this title of alternative medicine everything that was not proved yet and is not accepted as verified by the Western medical community. So that would be the definition that we work with. That would be the definition that we would work with. Now, so before we begin to debate or discuss and bring proofs about using unproved medicines, first we should remove from our way one big obstacle. And that is that some of these methods of alternative treatments include symbols or include acts that may bord, or maybe they are avodah zarah, they are idol worshipping. And that would not usually be your chicken soup. I don't know about anyone who worships his chicken. Maybe I know some people that worship their grandmother chicken soup. But usually it's not in a manner that would make a problem of avodah zarah. But with some of the ways that are coming, treatments coming from the East, that deal with energies and with the attempt to somehow channel these energies. So sometimes the channeling of these energies would work through mentioning the name of certain gods or deities that are supposed to be responsible for the specific energies. Now, again, I'm not going to mention any names because each one of these practices is being debated. And some of them maybe are problematic in their original way, but they have adaptations in which you skip the problematic part and it's still either work or not work, according to your belief. But maybe it keeps its whatever efficiency it has. So I would not name anything as mutar or asur. As I said, everything should be checked לגופו של עניין per the system that we are trying to investigate. But we have to know that if there are any elements of idol worshipping that are involved, then regardless if it works or not, even if it would be proved that it is able to heal you in a scientifically way, it would still be asur. And here we begin with our first source, and that's a Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah Kaf Zayin Amud Bet, and it tells the story of Ben Dama, who was the nephew, Ben Achoto, the son of the sister of Rabbi Ishmael. So he was the nephew of Rabbi Ishmael. And he was bit by a snake. And he was poisoned. And they didn't know how to cure him. And that was an extremely dangerous situation. And then came a guy, a fellow, named Yaakov Ish Kfar Sechania. Now, this fellow, Yaakov Ish Kfar Sechania, we are being told by the Mefarshim here, was actually the brother of Yeshu from Nazareth. And he was part of the cult. And he wanted to heal Ben Dama with a certain, using certain names of, I don't know, again, deities, of demons, or what they thought is able to heal. And back then they thought that it actually may work. Velo henicho Rabbi Ishmael. Rabbi Ishmael stopped him from curing his nephew. Ve'amar lo, and Ben Dama said to his uncle, Rabbi Ishmael Achi, my brother Rabbi Ishmael, hanach lo ve'rape mimeno, let him cure me, and then ani avi mikra min haTorah shehu mutar. I will bring you a text proof from the Torah that is allowed. So first let me be cured, and then let's have the halachic debate. But Rabbi Ishmael didn't let them. ולא הספיק לגמור את הדבר, they were not able to to finish the halachic discussion, עד שיצתה נשמתו ומת. So Ben Dama died there. קרא עליו רבי ישמעאל, and Rabbi Ishmael said regarding to him, אשריך Ben Dama, praised are you, Ben Dama, my nephew, שגופך טהור, that your body is pure, ויצתה נשמתך בטהרה, and your soul departed in purity, ולא עברת על דברי חבריך, and you didn't transgress, you didn't violate it, the halachic ruling of your friends. And that is because we hold that there are, although all of the Torah is being rejected, is being overwritten by the consideration of pikuach nefesh, of saving one's life, there are three cardinal sins, excuse me, that a danger to life cannot allow, cannot permit. One is bloodshed. You are not allowed to kill someone in order to save your own life. The second is gilui arayot, so forbidden sexual relationships cannot be permitted even in a case of danger to life. And the third is avodah zarah. So you are not allowed to use idols, even in a case of danger to life. Now, we today may think that the whole thing was a charade, and he would not be saved anyway, in which case, obviously, he was even more of a tzaddik, because that's, he would have died anyway, so it's much better to die pure than to die impure. So obviously, what we can learn from this Gemara is that if the treatment method includes elements of idol worshipping, then it is completely forbidden regardless of its efficiency. And that's the halacha also in the Shulchan Aruch, in Yoredea Kufnun Hei Aleph, says the Shulchan Aruch, Kol maka v'choli sheyesh b'hem sakana. So any injury or disease which are dangerous, life-threatening. Im yodea shemazkir shem avodat kachavim, if you know that the healer, that the physician, is going to use names, shemot, of avodah zarah to treat you, asur, it's forbidden. Afilu im yodea shevadai yamut. So that's very sharp language of the Torah. It says, even if one know, chas v'chalila, that he has two options, either to be treated by this idol worshiper that would use the name of idols and demons in order to cure him, or to die. So what should you choose? Says the Shulchan Aruch, in such unfortunate circumstances, you are to choose death. Because as we said, avodah zarah is one of the three cardinal sins that cannot be allowed even under the duress of life-threatening situations. And the Shulchan Aruch takes even one more step. Imu epikorus afilu stam lachash asur shevadai mazkir shem avodat kochavim. So let's say that we have someone who is a known idol worshipper, and we know that he's using the avodah zarah names in order to cure. But may I say, I do not ask, and he does not tell. So do I allowed to use his services if I don't ask how exactly does he cure, and he would not tell me, and everything would be fine? Says the Shulchan Aruch, no. If there is a good reason to believe that he's going to use the name of an avodah zarah, the name of an idol, then again it is better to die. And the Darchei Tshuva, it's very interesting. He says that in their time, so we speak about 300 years ago, 400 years ago, he says it was well known that there were people, healers, Christian healers, priests, that would go between the villages and they would cure, and I guess they had a blend of giving a certain type of vegetables and greeneries and other things that they thought would cure. And also they were using the name of their Messiah, of Yeshua. And the Darchei Tshuva says you are not allowed to be treated by them. You are not allowed to be treated by them. So that's That's a qualification that we must do before we begin our learning. So everything we speak about today is only if there is no fear of avodah zarah involved. Now, again, in the short research that I did for the sake of this shiur, it was given for me to understand that in most of the methods of alternative medicine, there is no connection to avodah zarah. Maybe there was somewhere in the past, in a historical sense, the way it developed, but the means that they use now are completely clean and free from avodah zarah. There may only be very few methods of some methods of meditation that people use, and some sorts of energy channeling that people use, that in which they do mention names of avodah zarah. But as I said, that's the exception. But the general rule, usually the alternative medicine does not include in it problems of avodah zarah. So that was one thing that we had to put away. Now, what the main topic that we would want to tackle today is not the question of avodah zarah. As I said, that's very rare. What we want to tackle today is, are you allowed, and to what extent are you allowed, to use means of medical treatment that are not statistically or scientifically verified? Now, you may think that's a very modern question, but already in ancient times, they understood that there is some difference between a type of medicine that we understand or that we see that it works, and types of medicines which seems to, even if people thought or believed that they work, they said it's work in a way of sgula. It's unnatural. It's supernatural in its working. And here we would see in a minute, the Chachamim debated, the sages debated, are you allowed to use such a type of medical treatment? So look at the Gemara in Shabbat Samech Zayin Amud Aleph, source Gimel. And there the Mishnah says, יוצאים בביצת החרגול ובשן השועל ובמסמר מן הצלוב משום רפואה, דברי רבי מאיר. So the Mishnah is in Masechet Shabbat, Tractate Shabbat, and it's in the middle of discussing the laws of Hotza'ah, meaning to say, in a place in which there is no Eruv, as you know, we are not allowed to take things from inside the house outside. Now, the question that was debated in the Mishnah was, are you allowed to take these cues outside? So Rabbi Meir said, you are allowed. So you are allowed to take, and you have the egg of a cockroach, right? And the teeth of a fox, and masmer min hatzaluv. So that's a very interesting method that they were using. But they would take a nail from a cross, not the cross of it's nothing religious. It has nothing to do with Christianity. Back then, all executions were made by tzliva. So that's they believed that taking a nail from a wooden cross would somehow help your, if someone was injured by a sword, then this nail can help him. So that was a belief, a popular belief. Rabbi Meir said, fine, they believe in that. Maybe we believe in that. So it is of cure. It may even save people's life. So you are allowed to take it outside. Maybe it can be considered as part of your clothing. But Chachamim said, Chachamim osrim af bechol mishum darchei ha'emori. Chachamim said, no, not only that we do not allow you to go out on Shabbat with these things, even on weekdays, you are not allowed to use them. Why? Because they are parts of the ways of the Gentiles, the Emorites. That's a Gentile nation. And they are used here as a symbol to all the Gentiles. So these are the manners of the Gentiles, they said. Using these things for cure, these are the ways of the non-Jews, and we are not allowed to follow them in these ways. So that's a very interesting machloket between Rabbi Meir and Chachamim. Rabbi Meir says you are allowed to use them, and even on Shabbat. And Chachamim said you are not allowed to use them even on weekdays. Now the question is, what exactly, how should we define the point of dispute between the sages, and how to apply this dispute to our topic? I think that we can all identify there are similarities here. We speak about methods of cureness that are irrational or unnatural or supernatural. Each one would define it the way he wants. And the question is, are you allowed to use them? Chachamim said no, and Rabbi Meir said yes, indeed. Now, Abaye Verava, the Amoraim that lived hundreds of years after the sages that disputed in the Mishnah, tried to give us a definition. How should we decide if a certain method of treatment is the ways of the Gentiles, or is it permitted? So Abaye Verava both said, כל דבר שיש בו משום רפואה, אין בו משום דרכי האמורי. So everything, every way of treatment that is mishum refuah, that is of healing, is not considered the ways of the Gentiles. Now that doesn't really give us a conclusive definition, because we still, what do you mean when you say that there is some treatment in it? That means that it sometimes works and sometimes not. That means that we can understand how it works. That means that it looks like it works. What does it mean when you say that if it is mishum refuah, if it is of healing, then you are allowed to use it? So while we are, obviously Chachamim were debating our question, but it's very difficult to just take the Gemara here and immediately apply it to our current topic. Now, obviously, what we need to use is to use the explanations of the early commentators, of the Rishonim, on this Gemara, and by that decide this somehow enigmatic statement that kol davar sheyesh bo mishum refuah is allowed. Everything that is of healing is allowed. But before we do that, just another more Mishnah, another more dispute between the sages. And this time we are in Mishnah Yoma. So that's the halachos of Yom Kippur. Says the Mishnah, Mi she'achazo bulmus. So if someone is attacked or is gripped by a bulmus, what is a bulmus? So a bulmus is a sudden hunger. We now maybe estimate or suggest that we speak here about someone with sugar problems, that his levels of insulin had suddenly fell or suddenly risen, and he needs to eat. He needs to eat and needs to eat immediately, even on Yom Kippur. So, Misha Chazo Bulmus, if someone is attacked by this bulmus, by this sudden hunger, which is not just you are being hungry, but it's a dangerous thing to your health. Ma'achilim oto afilu dvarim pim, should feed him immediately, whatever is available, even unkosher things, even stray things. Ad sheyeoru enav, till his eyes would become lit again. So that is, again, an attempted estimation that he ate enough. Fine, that is agreed. So if someone has this attack, then he's allowed to eat even on Yom Kippur, even non-kosher things. What about mi sheneshacho kelev shoteh? So if someone was bitten by a stray dog. Now, again, Chachamim, obviously they did not have the medical knowledge to say that this dog has, I didn't check it before the show, I should have. How do you say kalevet? That's the disease of
Is it rabies?
rabies. That's the name.
Rabies, I think so.
Yeah, that cause dogs and sometimes also other animals, weasels, I think, to bite people, and it's extremely dangerous disease. So there was a popular belief that if you are bitten by this type of a dog and you are able to capture him and you eat from his liver, חצר כבד שלו, from a certain segment, a certain part of his liver, that may save you. So that's an interesting popular belief because it's not very far from types of vaccines that we use today. So that's an interesting thought, but that was a popular belief. Now, Chachamim thought that you are not allowed to eat from the liver of a dog. Why? Because obviously it's non-kosher. This rabies is extremely dangerous disease. Yes. So if we would have a good solution, then obviously you would be allowed to eat it because of pikuach nefesh. If you'd have a good cure, a good medicine. But this chatzar kaved, this liver of the dog, that very rarely works. So there is no reason why you should eat from it, and you are not allowed, actually, according to the sages, to eat. But Rabbi Mattia ben Harash, there was one of the sages named Rabbi Mattia ben Harash, and he thought that it is allowed. So again, that's a similar dispute to what we saw in source Gimel in the Mishnah in Shabbat. Rabbi Meir thinks that you are allowed to use alternatives, methods of treatment, and Chachamim says it's asur. Either it's asur because of Shabbat, either it's asur because of its non-kosher food, or it's asur because it's the ways of the Gentiles, and it's completely asur. Now, on this Mishnah, we have the commentary of Maimonides, of Rambam. And he, who, as we all know, was a doctor, a very good one, so he would here explain to us how do we define what is considered as good medicine and what is considered as the way of the Gentiles. So the Rambam there says, En halacha ke Rabbi Mattia ben Harash. So we do not rule according to the opinion of Rabbi Mattia ben Harash, שמתיר להאכיל האדם ביום צום כיפור יותר את הכבד של כלב שוטה. So Rabbi Mattia ben Harash thought that if you were bitten by the stray dog, you are allowed to eat its liver, even on Yom Kippur. Now, it's not kosher anyway, but it's even a greater avera on Yom Kippur. Nonetheless, it's allowed. But Chachamim disagreed. Why? They said, מפני שזה אינו מועיל, אלא בדרך סגולה. That's not efficient. It doesn't really help. It's only a סגולה. Like magic. וחכמים אומרים, according to the sages, אין לעבור על מצווה, אלא ברפואה מרפאה בדרך הטבע. So חכמים hold, according to the Rambam, that you are only allowed to violate halacha for the sake of saving someone's life if it's a conventional medicine, if it's a natural, he says, בדרך הטבע. So only if it's a natural medicine, you are allowed to take it on Shabbat or to take it on Yom Kippur, etc. שהריפוי הוא דבר ברור ואמיתי מתוך הסברה, והניסיון הקרוב לאמת. So what does define a medicine that is conventional? Rambam here has two factors. One is שהדבר ברור ואמיתי מתוך הסברה. It makes sense. It's rational. The way we know human body and the way we understand it verifies that this specific treatment to this specific disease is supposed to help. Then you are allowed to do so. Second factor, criteria, הניסיון הקרוב לאמת, experience. So if you have and we need to discuss. You need to have both. One of them is enough. Which one of them? But the second criteria is experience. If the experience is near to truth, meaning to say that we have a very good experience that this medicine works, then you are allowed even to violate halacha to use this medicine. אבל ריפוי שעל ידי סגולות, but if you use סגולות, like the liver of the dog that bit you, that is forbidden, he says. That is אסור. לפי שעניינם חלוש, because it is weak. Our understanding of how they work is weak. לא יחייבן ההיגיון והסברה. So they are irrational. וניסיונן רחוק, also our experience points out to us they rarely work. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So that defines, it says, a medicine as סגולה, which for him means that you are not allowed to violate the Shabbat for it. וזהו העיקר דאהו וזוכרהו, it says this principle, you should know and you should remember, כי זהו עיקר גדול. He says that's a great principle, what I just told you. So again, there are two criteria by the Rambam. One is rationality. Can we speculate why this medicine should work? And the other is experience. Now, which one of them is more important? How they correlate with each other? Maybe both are important the same way. So in the Moreh Nevochim, in the Guide for the Perplexed, Rambam expands on his position. And there he says, כל מה שיאמר שהוא מועיל, everything that people say that works, is efficient, ממה שלא יגזור אותו העיון הטבעי, אבל נוהג לפי דעתם. So all the medicines that work, not because we rationally understand them, but just as it's a fault, usually of the Gentiles. כמנהג הסגולות והכוחות המיוחד, such as the סגולות and the extra powers, the energies. הוא אומרו בחוקותיהם לא תלכו. All of these are included according to the Rambam. So if it is not rational, it is included in the issue to follow the paths of the Gentiles. והם אשר יקראום ז"ל, and that's what חכמים called דרכי האמורי, the ways of the Gentiles. מפני שהם סעיפי מעשה המחשבים. He says these are parts, these are details from the deeds of the witches. That's very interesting. The magicians. Why? Because they are not rational, they are irrational. So when you begin to rely on irrationality, says Rambam, you may begin with some unconventional medicine, you would continue to unconventional beliefs, and in the end, says Rambam, you'd fall into Avodah Zarah. So Rambam, the great rationalist here, is following his worldview about medicine. And that's the way he explains the Gemara that we saw. ואמרו בפירוש, כל שיש בו משום רפואה, אין בו משום דרכי האמורי. So if there is medicine in it, then it is not a problem of following the Gentiles. Explains Rambam, רוצים בזה, so what they want to teach us is, שכל מה שיגזרהו העיון הטבעי, הוא מותר, וזולתו אסור. If it is natural, if it is rational, you can use it. If it is irrational and unnatural, you are not allowed to use it. Now you would ask, what about the nail from the cross or the tooth of the fox? What about them? Why Chachamim allowed them? Or Rabbi Meir allowed them? He answers, כי הדברים ההם בזמן ההוא היו חושבים בהם שהוציא אותם הניסיון והיו משום רפואה. Says Rambam, you know, our great leader should be the rational faculty. So rationality. But if there is something that is completely proved to work, then I would use it even if I cannot explain why. So I am not as closed-minded as to not allow anything that does not fit with my theory. So I would allow the use of proven medicines, even they do not fit into my theory of the human body. But if something is rational, it seems from the Rambam that I would use it even if it is not proved. If it is supposed to work, I may use it even without proof. If it is not supposed to work according to my rationale, then I need very good proofs to allow it. So that is the view of the Rambam. Now, according to that, if we would now return to our topic of alternative medicine, we would have to ask, does that make sense in our understanding of the natural world? Now, obviously, our understanding of the natural world is very different from the understanding of Rambam or of Aristotle, Havdil. But nonetheless, we can ask ourselves, does that make sense in our understanding that, for example, that water can remember? That is the basis of homeopathic medicine, and that is that water have memory. So if you are mixing water with some ingredient, and then you dilute, you can dilute it almost to infinity. And yet the water would remember the ingredient that they were with, and so it's not only water they sell, it's a medicine. Now, according to our understanding of the natural world, that is, water has no memory, to be, I think, short. So water has no memory, so the whole thing is baseless. It's baseless. It's irrational. But nonetheless, now the question would be, can we prove that it works? If you can prove that it works, then you, according to the Rambam, you'd be allowed to use it. If you cannot prove that it would work, then it would be asur, because it is the ways of the Gentiles. It makes no sense. It has no proof. So why do you use them? Because you follow the ways of the Gentiles. Because you are acting irrational. And today you are taking this medicine, and tomorrow, chas v'chayla, you'd bow down to a statue. That is the view of Rambam. Now, we have to know that this view is not the only, that's not the only product in the market. So there are other views, some of them very different from that of the Rambam. Now, before reading from the answer of the Rashba, that strongly disagreed with the Rambam, I would have to give you some background. Now, the Rashba was engaged, also the Ramban, his rabbi, they were engaged in certain type of medical treatment in which they believed that there are some energies, we would call them today, emanations that come down from the constellations, from the stars in the sky. So they believe that, for example, if someone has problem with his stomach, and stomach has to do, I don't know, with the constellation of the lion. So if you would make a statue of a lion or a figure, a metal figure of the lion, and you'd put it on his stomach in the time in which the lion constellation is on the horizon, then he would be cured because of the emanation. Now, they didn't see it as idol worshipping. It's not worshipping the stars. They thought that that's a natural, in a sense, a natural phenomenon, not really natural, supernatural phenomena, but it's like, it's not a divine force. It's just the way the world is, that there is this emanation. Fine. Now, so the Rashba was using that. And one of the sages of his time that was a disciple from the school of Rambam, he thought that that's completely irrational, maybe crazy also, and asur. So he asked the Rashba, how can you do that? How can you violate the issue of following the paths of the Gentiles? And the Rashba was writing him a long answer in which he tried to take apart Rambam allowed medicine. And this criteria, let's read inside. So he says the following, אני שואל כמסתפק בדברי הרב ז"ל. So he says, I don't understand, I have doubts, he says, in the words of Rambam. מהו הדבר שיקראהו הרב ז"ל, שיגזרהו העיון הטבעי? What exactly, he asks, very poignantly, what exactly is rational? How do you define rationality? I guess that everyone thinks it's rational. Your Rambam holds that only those who follow the ways of the Greeks is rational. Right? So if you follow Aristotle, if you follow Galenos, if you follow these guys, then you are rational. And if not, then you are irrational. But Rashba says, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. There are many things that are beyond what the Greeks were able to grasp and to explain and to speculate about. And he gives as an example the magnetic force. He says the magnetic force is something that no one understands. In his time, obviously it was much, much before, long before they understood the electricity and magnetic electricity forces, etc. So he says no one understands why the magnet works. That is, the magnet is irrational. So we would not be allowed to use it. The fact that there are things we cannot explain, the only things it proves is that we should not rely on our rationality. Instead, he says, what should be the foundation of our defining mutar and asur, or conventional and unconventional therapy, is only the question of experience. So he's not a rationalist, he's an empiricist. He says, if it works, that's the end of the story. I don't care why. Maybe it would be interesting to speculate. Maybe if we'd be able to speculate, we would be able to maybe understand and discover new medicines. But for me, it's not a criteria. It's not important. If it works, it is permitted. If it doesn't work, you are not allowed to use it. That's very simple. So that's almost 180 degrees from Rambam. Now again, Rambam admits that if something completely proved to be working, then it is allowed even if you do not understand it. But Rashba has lowered the bar a lot. He says, why do you care if it works 100% of the time? And if it works only for 70% of the sea? That's not good. Let's say that it works only for 20%. Won't you want to save 20%? 20% is also good. So Rashba says, I don't care if it works for 80% of the population or 10% of the population. If it works for some, I go for it, even if I cannot understand why. Now, so that's a very big machlokes. According to the Rashba, no problem with using homeopathic therapy. Why? Because, okay, I cannot understand why it works, fine. Many people testify that it worked for them. So obviously it worked for some segment of the population. I'm saying this obviously with a quotation marks, but obviously it works for some segment of the population. You know what? Even if only in a placebo effect, but fine, but it works. Why do I care why? So let it go. So Rambam would oppose and Rashba would accept. So that's a very big machloket. So Rambam would not be very happy, I guess, as all doctors that I know, he would not be very happy with alternative medicine. Maybe we think that much of it would be asur because of it is following the ways of the Gentiles, it is irrational. And Rashba says, who are you to define what is rational? We are not rational. We do not know everything. We should be humble. How does the Shulchan Aruch pasken? Well, it's not completely clear. It gives both opinions. See at source ח'. יוצאים בביצת החרגול ובשן של שועל ובמסמר הצלוב. So he says you are allowed to use these types of medicines, right? The tooth of the fox and the nail from the cross. You are allowed to use them on Shabbos or on weekdays. and it is not considered the ways of the Gentiles. And anything else that is mishum refuah. But what is mishum refuah of healing? אם עושה מעשה ואין ניכר בו שום משום רפואה, אסור משום דרכיו. It says, the Rashba says, the Shulchan Aruch, excuse me, if it doesn't look as, if it is completely seems unrelated to medicine, then it is asur. So that seems to go with the Rashba opinion, meaning that the cosmetics is enough. If it looks like medicine, then that is fine, that is allowed, even if we do not understand the rationality. But then the Shulchan Aruch adds, ויש מי שחשש, but those who fear, with this tendency, בכל קמע שאינו מומחה, in any קמע that is not mumche. Mumche means that it was experienced and checked. Then it is darchei Emorite. It's the ways of the Gentiles. So as the main opinion, Shulchan Aruch brings the Rashba, and as a second opinion, he brings the Rambam. Now, according to the rules of how the Shulchan Aruch rules, Paskins, then the first opinion is the one that we should follow, and the second one is only stringency. So those who want to be machmir would follow the second one, but the main ruling is leniency. So the main ruling here is as the Rashba. But that does not end with the Shulchan Aruch. About 60 years ago, someone named Rav Rosenberg from the States sent a question to Rav Moshe Feinstein, the Igut Moshe. And he asked him about using homeopathic medicine on Pesach. These were questions of bitul, and is it chametz, is it not chametz? But he was very surprised. The answer was not sent, the answer back to him was not sent by Rav Moshe Feinstein himself, but by his son-in-law. His son-in-law, the son-in-law of Rav Moshe Feinstein is the Dr. Moshe Tendler, who is still with us today. May he live ad 120. And he wrote a short and very curt answer. Let's read it. So state. בעניין כשרותם לפסח של תרופות הומאופתיות, so regarding the kashrut for Pesach, for homeopathic medicine, Mr. Rosenberg היקר, מורי וחמי הרב פיינשטיין שליטה, so I write in the name of my father-in-law, Rav Feinstein, he asked me to inform you, שאינו רוצה להתייחס, he doesn't want to answer a question, that's why I'm answering, he doesn't want. למרות הנקודות ההלכתיות המעניינות שבה, though it's halachically, it's very interesting, about ביטול, איסורים, and the chametz of alcohol, etc., etc. But he says, I'm not going to answer. You know why not? הרפואה ההומאופתית אינה ניתנת להיחשב כרפואה בדוקה או מנוסה. Homeopathic medicine is not experienced, is not verified, was not studied. And that's why we cannot use it, because it is opposed to the will of God. I repeat it again because that's a striking answer. He says using homeopathic medicine is against the will of God. Why? And he gives the Rambam's explanation. שיטה רפואית, a medical system, method, שמגנה הסברה שכלתנית, and in Berg, he puts it rationality. So an irrational method, מביאה לידי אמונות הבל. So that would lead you to believe in nonsense. ומסכנת את המתרפאים בה, should be, להשפעת פולחנים זרים. So you would be, if you are using it, you would be under the effect and the impact of foreign worships. אמונות נסתרות, hidden beliefs. And finally, you would deny the order of the world that God created. So that's striking. So he says, you asked me about Pesach, and I'm telling you that you're not allowed to use it all year round. And because he is not willing to be part of such a shita, he preferred to refuse answering you about the Pesach question. So Rav Feinstein preferred not to give an halachic answer regarding the Pesach because he was worried that his tshuva would be used. And I can imagine why. So the people that are pro-homeopathic medicine, they would utilize a tshuva by someone in the magnitude of the Igot Moshe. They would say, you see, he was also using it. Here, he discusses the question of its traceability on Pesach. So Rav Moshe Feinstein says, I don't want even to be mentioned in this regard. So that's a very sharp opinion, but obviously it is built on the foundation laid by the Rambam, that you are only allowed to use medicine that you completely understand or that is verified by the highest degree. But if it doesn't fall into one of these two categories, you're not allowed to use it. As you can guess, just as the Rambam and others disputed Rambam on this stage, on this position, so was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein disputed by. So I give one example, there are many wrote, but I give one example from Rav Chaim David Halevi, was the Rav Rashi of Tel Aviv, and he wrote the Shulchan Aruch Mekor Chaim that once upon a time was learned in schools in Israel. So he was a very known name, and a great halachic, a great decisive. And he says, he quotes this letter, and he says, I'm very shocked, amazed by this letter. Because even if let's say that I admit that homeopathic medicine is not verified. Now, I'm sure that people that believe in this type of medicine would be able to send me studies that do verify homeopathic medicine, because I in this very short check I ran before I began this shiur, I saw that it's very highly disputed if it is verified or not. So I obviously, I am not qualified to give you any opinion in this question. I am only using the sources, the halachic sources as they are in front of me. So again, returning to our question. So he says, let's take it as given that homeopathic medicine is non-verified in the conventional methods. Nonetheless, why would you not be allowed to use it? It is simple and clear, says Rav Chaim David Halevi, שכל סוג של תרופה שרוצה אדם להשתמש בה, every type of medicine, any type of medicine that a person wants to use, even that it is not rational, it is gulit bilvad, there is no issue in that. There's no problem. It is not opposed to the will of God. And there is no reason to believe that it would lead someone to worship idols. As Rav Tendler wrote. If someone's belief, have faith in a certain medicine or treatment, says Rav Chaim David Halevi, he is allowed to use it. And more than that, sometimes your very belief that this medicine would work for you would make it work for you. And that is something that is verified in many, many studies. That's called the placebo effect. If you take something you believe would help you, even the truth is it's just water, then obviously it won't cure you from something that is very critical. But some pains, for example, can go. Why? Because you believe, you have a strong conviction that would help you, that would heal you. So he says, why not use that? Now, we saw two very different opinions. One is the opinion of Rambam, who says everything should be decided by rationality. If it is rational, if it is adheres to science, then it is allowed. If it's out of the scientific field, then if it's proved, really proved, then you can use it. If not, it's asu. So that was the Rambam, and that was Rav Moshe Feinstein. On the other hand, we have the Rashba and Rav David Chaim Halevi, and obviously many, many, many others. I'm just giving two examples which wrote in a way that it was easy for me to bring. But they held that it's all a question of your experience. And if your experience is this cure can work, you're allowed to use it, no problem at all. No problem at all. Only if it is something that seems completely out of, that you yourself do not believe in. Then it doesn't look like medicine. Then you are not allowed to use it. Then it would be, so if you don't believe in it, that it would heal you, why do you use it? You want to follow the ways of the Gentiles. That is forbidden. Now, as we saw in the Shulchan Aruch, it seems that the mainstream opinion is that we do not require scientific verification or rational explanation in order to allow using a certain treatment. Rather, if someone believes that a certain substance or a certain treatment would help him, he is allowed to use it. That is the halacha. Now, if someone wants to be strict and go by the Rambam and was convinced by the argument that everything should be rational, then obviously that's fine, great. But that is not the mainstream of halacha. The mainstream of halacha then would allow someone to use even out of the box, we may say, medical methods. But nonetheless, we need, I think, to give two qualifications to that. One is that it seems that if you do use let's put it that way, if you use non-orthodox medicine, you still have to adhere to the orthodox halacha. So you would not be allowed, let's say that this, if let's say this is homeopathic medications, for example, won't be kosher to Pesach, you would not be allowed to use them under the argument that that's a pikuach nefesh. Why? Because it's not a pikuach nefesh. They are not proved to work. Obviously, there are ways how to solve that, but that would be the halacha. So if it is against halacha, you are not allowed to use non-conventional medicine. The other qualification is that you are allowed to use, one is allowed to use this type of medicine as complementary, but not as alternative. Meaning to say, I think that's the usual way in which it is right now in Israel. We do not even call it refuah alternativit, we call it refuah mashlima. So refuah mashlima means that after you have, or together with, the conventional treatment, which is proved to work, and you want to improve your chances, or maybe to be assisted, or maybe to reduce the pain by using non-conventional medicine, then that is mutar, as we said, at least according to the Rashba, according to the halacha. But you are not allowed to neglect conventional treatment, especially for life-threatening situations, and go only with which would really be alternative medicine. Why? Because you are not allowed to forego efficient, proved treatment. That is the issue of damaging oneself. You are not allowed to damage yourself. Choosing alternative treatment that is not proved to work, to be efficient, and rejecting a treatment that is proved to work, that is also. Now, obviously, many situations are not so cut and clear. And sometimes conventional medicine would say, no, we have some treatment, but also we don't know if it works. And in that case, you'd be allowed to choose what you think has a better chance to work. Obviously, one would be advised to consult with many people as possible and to get many different point of views and to make an educated, even if it's a guess, but an educated guess. So if we conclude, then while there were opinions in halachic history that rejected the use of non-proved or non-rational or supernatural or above-natural medicine, that is not the way that halacha was, in the end, was codified. According to the Shulchan Aruch and according to what seems to be the majority opinion of the poskim, one is allowed to use unconventional medicine as long as he keeps these two qualifications, we have mentioned. One is that he does not violate any halachic ruling, and the second is that he does not danger himself in any way. Okay, so next week is Hanukkah, and we will be on a family vacation, so there would be no shiur. Next week, I hope that there would be no seger and nothing that would prevent the vacation. So while I do want obviously to learn with you, but it is important also to give time to the family. So there will be no shiur next Sunday, and should all have Hanukkah Sameach, and we would meet in Yirtzeh Hashem 2 weeks from now.
Thank you. Hanukkah Sameach.
Hanukkah Sameach.